Well, greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, the notoriously sanctimonious RMB, here for Robservations live chat number 121. Unbelievable. First of all, I want to thank everybody for still being here and thank all of the amazing amount of new subscribers that have joined this channel in the last couple of days. Welcome. Welcome to the Post-Geek Singularity community. I think it's the most interesting and the most vibrant community on YouTube, if I do say so myself. And you're all of you, imagination connoisseurs. So thank you for being here. Once again, this chat is brought to you by Lucky Tiger Men's Grooming Products. Lucky Tiger for men who want to look good and feel great. And I just used their facial scrub again on my face before I came on. And for those who might be interested, you can go to getluckytiger.com and buy their great products. And when you check out, punch in PGS for Post-Geek Singularity, and you get 20% off your entire order. As many of you know, today is my birthday, and I want to thank you for all of the birthday wishes I've received from everybody. A deluge of wishes have come in over the transom of social media. It's always fun, you know. No matter how bad you're feeling, every time sometimes when you wake up in the morning, you don't really realize it's your birthday until you look at social media. Between Twitter, my emails, Facebook, Instagram, I want to thank all of you for the wonderful birthday wishes, and that's amazing. So thank you, and keep them coming. My day's not over yet. And I want to start out, I've got a couple of some really long letters, doozies of letters that I'm really excited about. But first, I missed a super chat yesterday, and it was funny because I really liked this super chat, and I realized I forgot to get back to it. And when you guys send in a super chat, you're actually supporting the channel with your ducats. If I miss your super chat, it's an egregious error, and I apologize. But I mostly apologize to Roberto Suarez, whose super chat I missed. But he wrote me an email, even though my moderators, Jim, Terry, and Mike, told me that I missed these super chats, or his super chat. But he also wrote me a letter, and his letter is actually better than his super chat. So I'm going to read Roberto Suarez's letter to set things off on this, my birthday. Roberto says, "Thank you for the great platform you've provided. I've enjoyed listening to you and the community share their thoughts and feelings about the things we love. I asked you a super chat question yesterday, but in the midst of all the discussion, you skipped over it, which I profusely apologize for. So I figured I'd ask you again through a letter. I had a question about The Force Awakens and the Star Wars sequel trilogy as a whole. I had a question about The Force Awakens and the Star Wars trilogy as a whole, and you have mentioned that one of your axioms is never put your universe before your characters. I feel like The Force Awakens did a good job of establishing compelling characters, yet has failed to deliver much clarity around its universe. I still don't understand the nature of the First Order and how they can exist after the events of Return of the Jedi. Neither do I. How does your axiom apply to the Star Wars sequels, where it seems to me that they've done a good job creating compelling characters, yet the universe seems poorly defined? And regarding being an older geek, I'm just a few years younger than you, so I feel your pain. However, I'm a firm believer that every community needs its elders and wise men, and as far as I know, you are the wise leader of the Post-Geek Singularity. Thanks again for taking the time to read this. I hope you have a wonderful birthday. Live long and prosper. Roberto Suarez, Portland, Oregon, Puerto Geekian, at Puerto Geekian. I love that. Well, Roberto, you've been a longtime supporter of the channel, and you've been here, and thank you for participating. I think this is a great question to kick off this day. Yes, for those of you who don't know, I have an axiom. I call it the Burnett axiom. I came up with it, I think, on Collider Heroes, and that is never put your universe before your characters. And as we've seen, everybody wants the MCU. Everybody wants the same kind of cheddar that Marvel is clocking with their MCU, with their 22 movies that make up the Infinity Saga. And now they're closing in on $21 billion of earnings over 22 movies. They're going to average that they're eventually going to average $1 billion a film, even though they, of course, if you look at the box office, like Captain America, the First Avenger, did not make $1 billion initially, But if you average out what they've all earned over 22 movies, $1 billion a film. This is so unprecedented in Hollywood. No one's ever done it. Now, I think we've had other franchises such as the Bond franchise and Harry Potter and Star Wars. And while Star Wars: The Force Awakens is still the number one domestic grosser, it has been overtaken worldwide by Avengers Endgame. But the Star Wars universe, first of all, this is a great question. The Star Wars universe is one of the great franchises of all time, and it's become a rite of passage for most kids around the world that have access to movie theaters and home video and the internet. And I think Roberto asks a really important question. And one of the things that I think Star Wars did so brilliantly, the original Star Wars, not A New Hope, but Star Wars, did in 1977, that it introduced us to characters and a universe concurrently. And if you remember, sure, the first thing we see is we see Tatooine in all of its glory, and then we see a Rebel blockade runner and an Imperial Star Destroyer, and the Rebel blockade runner is overrun herself, taken into the hangar deck or the hangar bay of the Imperial Star Destroyer. Hijinks ensue. But who are we met? Who are we introduced to first? We're introduced to Princess Leia, well, R2 and 3PO first. Then we're introduced to Princess Leia. Then we're introduced to Darth Vader. So we are introduced to the characters, but at the same time, we're being introduced to that universe. But all the way through Star Wars, even though the universe is so rich, it is the characters that are always at the forefront of the story. We are learning about the universe that they inhabit as we go. Nothing ever stops to be like, okay, let us explain these things. Now, Star Wars did rely on a shorthand, such as calling the Empire was the Empire. Now, we, living on Earth, if you know your history, have an understanding of what an empire is, the difference between, say, a republic and an empire. And so the movie, it used a shorthand, and then it showed you glimpses. One of my favorite instances of world building is in the movie Star Wars, and that is, of course, when we first meet the leaders that are on the Death Star, that have gathered on the Death Star under the command of Grand Moff Tarkin and Vader. Of course, we have that great scene when the Imperial generals or whoever they are sitting around that table. You know, until this battle station is fully operational, we are vulnerable. And they have this entire conversation about the Force, and we learn a great deal through this exposition, but it's also pushing the plot forward. We're not only learning about the Death Star and its capabilities, and the ability to destroy a planet is insignificant next to the power of the Force. We're learning about military might versus the power of the Force. It's a brilliant bit of exposition and a brilliant bit of world building. So we are learning about these things at the same time. Now, I would say that Roberto is correct. We are introduced to the characters in Star Wars, The Force Awakens, these new characters that we've never met, and they are somewhat well-defined, but we don't know enough about the universe at large. I think that is a valid criticism, and I think part of the reason is that The Force Awakens was approached not as a story unto itself, but it was it was an investment opportunity. We had our the new stewards of the franchise, Disney, had to their mandate was to make a film that was palatable to a worldwide audience, that was designed to be as easily digestible as possible. So what did they do? They basically gave us a retread of the original Star Wars, mixing and matching things and giving us what they thought we wanted. And it worked brilliantly. The movie made over $2 billion worldwide. However, I would say that the movie look, a lot of people like The Force Awakens. I think as a film and as a Star Wars movie, it did not succeed nearly as well as a story and as a movie. But as a product that was sold, succeeded brilliantly. But I think all of the things that Roberto mentioned were accurate. We don't know who the First Order is. And just like people would say, well, you didn't know who the Empire was either. Yes, but by calling it an empire, and being given glimpses of how the power structure worked, hearing about the Imperial Senate. They gave us enough drips and drabs that we understand from our own history what it all meant. What is a first order? We don't know. We've already seen an empire. We saw the empire fall at the end of Return of the Jedi. It's been 30 odd years. We aren't given enough information. The filmmakers, J.J. Abrams and Lawrence Kasdan, in their screenplay just assumed that we would learn these things. And of course, well, wait a minute. If you read Aftermath, it fills in that they were on the outer, the First Order was on the outer rim. And I'd be like, you're really? Well, where did they get the money to build all those dreadnoughts? Whatever. I don't think everything that Star Wars did so brilliantly in terms of storytelling, in terms of introducing first your characters and then your universe, Star Wars is a perfect example of the Burnett axiom. The Force Awakens did not do nearly as well. And unfortunately, when you have that imbalance, as we get to episode 9, it's very funny. You look back and really what people wanted was a new trilogy about Han, Leia, and Luke. That's what we all wanted. And I think right now we're all looking back going, okay, while I enjoy Poe Dameron and Rey is fine and Kylo Ren, okay, these are not characters that have permeated the zeitgeist the way that Han, Luke, and Leia did. I mean, sure, they're now part of the overall Star Wars thing, but judging by the hot toys that you can still get from these new movies, all of the ones that seemingly have sold out or the ones that are difficult to get are either from Rogue One, which is set during the time of the original trilogy, or the original trilogy figures. I mean, Leia and Hoth fatigues sold out, but you can still get Rey, you can still get Finn. They never made a Poe figure, I don't think. But it's interesting. So who knows? But I think you're absolutely right. And that leads into another letter. Now, this letter's epic. And this epic letter inspired this conversation. I think you guys are going to have a lot to say about this. But again, it comes from a side, I would say a side of the fan aisle that I don't normally inhabit necessarily. But when I read this letter, I was like, oh, I got to share this one. And it's my birthday, so I can. This letter comes from William La Rochelle, and it's long, so bear with me. Robert, I find there is so much content that I question long videos, especially if they are padded with what everybody did on the weekend. It starts being about personality and false community and not ideas. At best, if the ideas trigger something, we are drawn into the conversation in a sense and have to use forms like this, rather than perhaps the minefield of YouTube comment sections. A listener cited Ready Player One and the Dan Brown books as bad genre writing. Well, I've read all of the Robert Langdon mysteries, as have I, as Hanks calls them, and enjoy them. They might be a little over-explanatory. Inferno mentions eugenics in what I'd prefer to see as an off-the-cuff reference, but it is followed by a paragraph explaining its origins in Hitler. I get that a global audience for a book that will be translated widely might need to be very simple prose and those kinds of explanations, but there is an element that I call Joshua Tree syndrome. My friends were huge U2 fans when they were few, and it was a kind of a cult or a secret handshake until the album, The Joshua Tree, was a big hit and people generally jumped on the bandwagon. Believe it or not, the old adage of I loved my favorite indie band until their first commercial album, then they went commercial. I happened to hear Anna, that Star Wars girl, report from a convention that when Ian McDiarmid appeared on stage, she overheard some people saying, "Who was that old guy?" She told them, or claimed to tell them, "If you don't know the Emperor, why are you at a Star Wars convention?" I think there is an objective measure for storytelling, and it is the monomyth or Aristotle's Poetics via Joseph Campbell, who demonstrated how we are hardwired to crave certain journeys, regardless of one's upbringing. There has been pushback against this, as some claim it is a Western white imposition on storytelling, even though that contradicts Campbell's theory. So-called ownership of a fandom should not be an issue. If the built-in fan base is going to be lured and exploited and outright lied to, no, Cumberbatch is not Khan in Star Trek Into Darkness, said J.J. Abrams. Or if a corporation takes over an IP and dismisses or reclassifies hundreds of books, some no older than a few years, that some fans had been told were approved canon and had spent God knows how much money and hours absorbing, who is in the wrong? If Kathleen Kennedy doesn't feel Star Wars is her cup of tea and she sees no inherent value in it, then is it only a delivery device for a forced social justice warrior agenda? Why sideline Leia for most of The Last Jedi? Story-wise, it would be so much more consequential for Poe to mutiny against her rather than someone of lesser rank. And if Leia intuits her son closing in on her location, why not grab an oxygen mask? And Admiral Akbar dying off screen? Dumb. They could have both been floating and Akbar shoves her clear of a hit. Maybe Leia balls her fists and stops herself from floating, and that is the urgent moment she embraces the Force, while still conscious. Maybe she climbs into a floating X-Wing and does some cleanup. That would have been the comfort food, and nothing would have been lost. Regardless of Luke's reasons for non-involvement, how ham-fisted to have him be a dick. When you are the only human on a planet and one other person comes along using a trail of breadcrumbs you provided, why shut them out and be uncommunicative? I might have had Luke toss the lightsaber, but I would be Disney enough to have it rise up behind Rey and follow her like a dog and clip itself back onto her belt and have Luke say over his shoulder, "That's yours now. I already made a new one a long time ago." He could offer her tea and mystery milk and be cordial while shutting down her concerns. Kathleen Kennedy saying, "I don't owe anything to the older male fans," cost Star Wars a few $100 million. Ryan tangling with fans on Twitter cost Star Wars another few $100 million. I suspect Disney won't oust Ryan formally because he could argue it hurt box office of Knives Out in November. Solo also was definitely hurt by the choice of Iger to ignore that families now had a new tradition of Christmas Star Wars, and that would have made a substantial difference. There hadn't been a May release in 13 years. It showed a disconnect from or indifference to the target audience and the most vocal audience, as well as those who buy the most merch. I get that Lucasfilm owns part of Hasbro, so it can release a Holdo or a Rose Tico figure, and they don't have the pushback Star Trek gets or for their new designs or characters. But wow, everything Midnight's Edge says about Bad Robot conflicts with toy and model companies really shows greed, if not contempt, for the consumer. For those reasons, when an insider or a talk show host or star or anyone backed by a studio marketing budget or the access media wants to talk about divisiveness as if it is created or the fault of fans who have little agency in the whole mess, I can't help thinking that is deeply dishonest. When I heard of Solo being made, I thought Lawrence Kasdan, good choice. The 22 Jump Street improv wranglers, bad choice. I thought Anthony and Gruber should have gotten the part, and second choice would have been impressionist Jamie Costa of Han Solo, A Smuggler's Trade. But because Kennedy was so inattentive, maybe used to working with the best directors like Spielberg, she had no idea what they were doing until it was a PR disaster. And even though Ron Howard is a worthy director, favorite movie of his, Night Shift, Bill Blazejowski, one of the greatest characters ever, the internet fires had started. Some believing maybe Lord and Miller had some non-PC content, but more likely the problem was their noted lack of visual planning. The documentary on the 22 Jump Street DVD drives home their rejection of storyboarding and their preference for freedom of actors. I think Lucasfilm figures hire somebody relatively new that they can be controlled, but popular enough that they can seem cutting edge. I think there are some pundits of fandom who want to calm the fires of blowback from the fandom menace, etc. But I think Lucasfilm and Bad Robot reap what they sow. No matter what Star Wars content comes out, the final trilogy with the original cast we care about is compromised. And it is almost psychotherapy for some people to vent online, without the stigma of therapy. Although, as I've remarked about the Post-Geek Singularity, I wonder if now that nerd or geeks are not so much pejoratives implying social awkwardness, they haven't been replaced by terms like incel that sound even more degrading. Usually someone in a high place or publication punching down at average fans who are disenfranchised or expatriate fans of an IP. I didn't hear the term incel until we in Toronto had a deranged guy drive a van into a crowd on Yonge Street, and he repeatedly had his problems chalked up to that. Then I looked back and saw Elliot Rodger in California was also called an incel. Recently, this is also called beta uprising. And even before Louis C.K. had his scandal, his fans were being called incel. Frankly, in a world full of sex workers, I don't see how someone is involuntarily celibate. And calling people beta in a world where there are so few alphas makes no sense. It's just a weapon to presume to shut people down, like mansplain or white splain or fanboy splain, which is counterintuitive to trying to understand people and find common ground. By the way, every now and then I'll put on Free Enterprise. I like it. I especially like the crazy idea Shatner pitches actually paying off as an entertaining sequence. I also really like that you went to the trouble of a Logan's Run dream sequence. The end of that letter. That's from William La Rochelle. Now, I have to tell you, Bill, can I call you Bill or William? I don't know what you go by. I don't agree with a lot of your letter. I don't. Because first and foremost, first of all, I want to say I love this letter, however. I love that you sent it. I thought it was thoughtful. I thought it was really interesting, and it certainly made me think. And I started, I've been pondering the idea of franchises most of my life because I've been a huge fan of Star Trek, obviously, Star Wars since it came out in May of 1977. And the things I also loved growing up, such as The Twilight Zone, which as a child was not a franchise. It was a television show that ran from 1959 to 1964. Gilbert is outside barking, if you can hear him. And yet now we have our third iteration, if you include the movie, fourth iteration of The Twilight Zone that's currently airing on CBS All Access. So even The Twilight Zone has become an IP, a franchise. But here's the thing. I don't think fans, and I hate to say this, ever factor into the thinking of these conglomerates, certainly not publicly held companies. They're not thinking about the fans. I know for a fact that the fans do not enter into the conversation because the fans will turn up. They have proven time and time again, you can talk all you want about boycotting Star Wars. People go, no, you're not. You're all going to be there opening day for episode 9. The fans, I could talk about, I rail at Star Trek Discovery. Do you think that I'm not going to watch the Picard show when it's on the air? Do you think I'm not going to watch the last episode of Game of Thrones? It's ridiculous. And I do think what's really interesting is that when it comes to these IPs, what is past is prologue. None of it matters when Disney spends $4 billion buying the Star Wars franchise. They now have a certain mode that they go into in terms of how they're going to think, what are we going to do with this investment? Now, the first thing that they're thinking about is, of course, we have to make a movie. We have to make a new Star Wars movie. That is the basis of our franchise. Everything is driven by the engine of our films. So what are we going to do? What is the safest thing? What is the least risk-averse thing that we can do? Well, at the time, you got to hire filmmakers that prove that they can work in the franchise space. J.J. Abrams has had many, he's been a writer since Regarding Henry. He's had many TV shows do very well. He's a successful Hollywood director, and he's now a franchise director. His first feature was Mission Impossible 3. Then he directs 2 Star Trek movies. He directs Super 8. He's very well liked in the industry. He's hot and he's relatively young. And then you bring back Lawrence Kasdan, the man who co-wrote The Empire Strikes Back with Lee Brackett, the man who wrote Raiders of the Lost Ark, a director himself. And they work on The Force Awakens, the new Star Wars movie. Now, as far as they're concerned, as far as Disney is concerned, and as far as most people in Hollywood are concerned, they don't care about books. They don't care about tie-in fiction. None of that's real, according to them. They're not thinking that, oh, well, we have the universe that we have to maintain, the extended universe. Nobody at Disney is even thinking that way. You might say, well, what about the Lucas Story Group? Look, the Lucas Story Group, whoever's around, it's all new. The slate is clean. So it doesn't really matter to them. It just doesn't. That's part of the past. It's not part of their stewardship of the Star Wars franchise. It's not something that they're even going to look at because it doesn't matter. They're starting brand new, clean slate, and they need to be able to now control the franchise that they just spent $4 billion purchasing, $4 billion plus. They're simply not. That Gilbert is barking because the landscapers are here, and so he just barks at them all the time. So there's really nothing I can do about that. Gilbert, please don't bark at the landscapers. That won't do any good. He'll bark at the landscapers anyway. So I might have to maybe cut this short. But so all of these things that people are saying, like all of the fans, this season of Game of Thrones is hugely successful. More people are watching it than ever before. Now, does that, with all of the online controversy everybody talking about, this season sucks, none of that has affected HBO's bottom line. They're laughing all the way to the bank. The mentions they're getting on social media, their viewership is way up. By any metric, this season of Game of Thrones is the most successful season. The people, the powers that be, do you think Disney's going, wow, we're looking at this online controversy about Weiss and Benioff in their final season of Game of Thrones. Maybe we should rethink our Star Wars movies. No. They're thinking about 8 seasons of one of the most talked about television shows of all time. That's what they're interested in. Fans do not matter. They just don't. They don't matter to the powers that be that own these franchises. And what happens is we didn't become fans of franchises that were so important to corporations at the time. Star Wars was basically one man's vision. It was George Lucas's vision, and then with The Empire Strikes Back, he took back ownership of the franchise himself. He got it financed by himself. He owned Star Wars, so what he chose to give us, even though he doesn't like Empire, he doesn't like what Irvin Kershner did with Empire, shooting most of the movie in master shots. Not a fan, but he owned it. So Star Wars was coming from one man and the concerns of one man and his company, Lucasfilm. He was not beholden to shareholders. So, Gilbert, please don't do that. I didn't realize the landscapers were coming today. I apologize. They don't have a regular schedule, kind of like this show. But so as I read your letter, I don't necessarily disagree with what you're saying, but there is a misconception on the part of fandom that the studios respond to one thing, and that's money. Their job is to make a product, and you're supposed to buy it. Solo is the only time when they look and, oh, that didn't work. Why didn't Solo work? Well, people can pontificate all they want. I think it's fairly obvious because the character of Han Solo has been embodied by one man for 40 years, and then we watch that man die, and a couple of years later, they give you a Han Solo movie that it doesn't star Harrison Ford. I think a lot of people were like, well, why would I want to see that? As good as the movie could be, and I quite liked Solo, but you're watching a film that isn't it. Why would you make a film? Look, Captain Kirk died in Generations. William Shatner died in Generations in 1994. We watched William Shatner age. He played the character from 1966 to 1994. That is a long time in pop culture history for one actor to play the same character. And part of that character, his aging was incorporated into it. Now, if J.J. Abrams tried to make Star Trek 09, but say in 1996, I don't think people would have bought off on it. I really don't, because Kirk, Spock, and McCoy are too indelible. They're too memorable in our pop culture zeitgeist that you could expect that somebody else could play them. Frankly, I think it was a tremendous mistake to go back and try and reinvent Kirk, Spock, and McCoy, both in the J.J. Abrams movies and in Star Trek Discovery. Because Star Trek has proven that Star Trek The Next Generation, incredibly successful. You reinvent the franchise. you keep its core values, you keep its core ideas, and then you create brand new characters. Once again, when you try and go back and recreate Kirk, Spock, McCoy, or you put Mr. Spock in Star Trek Discovery, you are violating the Burnett axiom. You are putting your universe before your characters. What do they do in Star Trek Discovery? Gilbert, please stop. Please stop. Please. Come here. You want a cookie? Want a cookie? Maybe he'll stop barking. It's very difficult to think, and I'm sure nobody wants to hear. Here, Gilbert, here. You know how he loves his cookies. Come here, buddy. We'll see. Can I get him to come with a cookie? Can I lure him here? Gilbert, have a cookie. Well, the gardeners are too, I don't know. But anyway, so we have this idea that there is this weird idea in fandom that we're owed something, and we're not. We're not owed anything. We now have a franchise that is no longer the baby of one man. It's no longer coming directly from George Lucas, and it came directly from George Lucas from 1977 to 2005. That's a long time. And the Lucasfilm Story Group and everybody that was involved was servicing really the ideas of one man. Once you sell Star Wars off to Disney, the concern is not the vision of one man anymore. The concern, like the Burnett axiom, gets flipped, and it's the universe that becomes important. It's the Star Wars universe that becomes important. And then what happens is that they're trying to make movies. Do you think Disney wants to make movies that people don't like? They're not in that business. They're in the business to make the most populist, most progressive, most not progressive necessarily, but the most profitable story that they can possibly make. That's what they want to do. They're not interested in anything else. They're not interested in giving the fans what they want, unless that means the fans are going to give them as much money as they expect. And they certainly did with The Force Awakens, which was anomalous. Everybody wanted to see Star Wars come back. But really, what I don't think was totally understood is, from a corporate standpoint, they're thinking, oh, we need to create new characters for our new audience because we need to move forward with Star Wars into the future. What they didn't realize is that what everybody really wanted to see and what they needed to sustain these three movies at a certain level of profitability, not The Last Jedi making, what, $1.3 billion? It was the number one movie of the year it came out. But people didn't get from it what they wanted, because what they really wanted was the continuation and the end of the story of Luke, Han, and Leia. And we didn't get that story. It should have been a trilogy that was designed from the get-go, not as one movie. They announced they were making three, so they should have had people design their story, their characters, where the character is going to go, what is the story going to be, and where does that leave the universe. They didn't do that. And I think what's really interesting is we've never lived in a world where Episode 9, frankly, I don't even care. As a longtime Star Wars lover and somebody who saw Empire Strikes Back 26 times, I'll see Episode 9. I'm curious more from a storyline sense, like what are they gonna do with these characters? I have no vested interest in any of them. I'm more interested to see, they've kind of written themselves into a corner, but now we're going to get Leia from the cutting room floor. Maybe we'll see Luke again, but okay, I'll watch Lando because Lando's coming back. I mean, I'm more interested to see where R2-D2, Lando, and C-3PO wind up than anything else, because the other characters are variations on a theme, and they have not told us a story yet, I think, in either one of those movies that make those new characters compelling enough that I want to follow them wherever else they go. And I think that was unfortunately a mistake. But the question is, fans don't own these things, unfortunately. And we have to kind of come to grips with the fact that when things happen that we don't think should happen, that doesn't necessarily mean they're unsuccessful. We might not like what Rian Johnson did in The Last Jedi. I like The Last Jedi. There's a lot about The Last Jedi that I like. Do I think it's an entirely successful film? No. There's many decisions that were made in the storytelling and the plot of that film that leave me somewhat perplexed. And I don't understand, just from an astute viewer of films and and reader of books and watcher of television, a student of stories, I don't understand a lot of what makes The Last Jedi, why they sat down and said, this is right. This is exactly what I want to do. But then again, I also feel that way about The Force Awakens. So, and of course, Game of Thrones and a lot of other different things that I've watched. But these corporations, they want these stories to be, they want you to love them. They're not trying to actively work against the audience. That's what somebody needs, or all of you, everybody needs to understand, is that they want to provide the best movie and the best television experience possible. Even the people that are making Star Trek Discovery, CBS wants the show to be the greatest thing ever. The problem is there's nobody at the corporate level, nobody that's working at Disney who knows how to do that. All they can do is hire people that on a spreadsheet or based on their prior work, that they can believe that these people that we're hiring are going to be able to bring us the kind of success that we as executives do not understand, because that kind of success, you can't quantify it on a spreadsheet. And that's the world that we're living in. These franchises that we love, once they become franchises, the money they're generating becomes extremely important, but the people that are in charge have no idea how to create the kind of experiences that audiences embraced in the first place that made these franchises what they are. And I'm sure that's true of everything. Now that there's so much money, whether it's video games, whether it's movies, whether it's television shows, I mean, the amount of money that Star Trek Discovery costs. Are you done, buddy? Come here, buddy. The amount of money that Star Trek Discovery costs, it's amazing to me. Here's Gilbert. You finally decided not to bark more, huh, buddy? Yeah, dude. Would you like another one? You just want one? You don't want two? You didn't even stay up and no, you don't want to? No? All right. Well, I don't know. You feeling okay? But anyway, that's what people don't get. And nobody wants to make something that doesn't make money. Everybody's trying to make the best possible thing they can. They're trying to mitigate their risk every step of the way by hiring people that they immediately can say they can, and they can also talk to their corporate overlords. When Bob Iger talks to his investors, he's trying to reassure them that, hey, you know what? We might not be making Star Wars movies for 3 years, but over here at Disney Plus, we got The Mandalorian, we've got the Cassian Andor series, and whatever the mysterious third series that we are making, that's coming out too. So there's not going to be any missing Star Wars for our viewership. We're just having it on Disney Plus instead of in the movie theaters. That's what's going on. And they want to make it the best they can. It's just they have to hire people that on a spreadsheet they can point to and justify and say, oh, we can hire these people. So all of the bitching and moaning that happens, it's funny to me because Disney, they're not pushing an agenda. They're not. Their agenda is to sell their movies to as many people as possible. And in this world, in this time that we live in, it's very important that there's inclusion. It's very, very important that all people are represented because these movies are being sold around the world. And it's not, Disney's not saying, you know what, now is the time that we're going to put women at the forefront as opposed at the cost of men. There's none of that. None of that is happening. The fact is now there's just as many female audience members that love these movies as men. And the gender lines, all of it's changed. The whole world loves Star Wars. It's not just dudes, and Disney knows this. Gilbert, please. And so this idea that, these films, Kathleen Kennedy is injecting a feminist agenda. I mean, just because she says something, look, I'm a middle-aged white guy, and I can tell you, Gilbert, please, I can tell you that for most of my life, when I was going to conventions and things like that, the audience for those things was predominantly men. Sure, there was women there, but it was predominantly men. And I have watched over the last 25 years when that pendulum has shifted. And now everybody loves these things. There's no longer a gender gap or a gender disparity. So when they add more female characters in or they make Star Wars female-centric, there's nothing wrong with that. They're just trying to serve the audience as it exists today. I don't see any kind of gender inequality, or I don't see any political agenda. You think that a company like Disney has a political agenda? Their agenda is to make money. That's what they want to do, and they want to appeal to the world. I mean, Star Wars has never performed in China. They want to figure out a way, how do we crack the China market and get some of that Avengers cheddar for Star Wars? That's all it is. But yet everybody bitches and moans and complains. But anyway, I'll move on to a different letter. I did like your letter very much. I think it's really worth discussing. But the fact is, when our favorite franchises are sold to our corporate masters at Disney, and someone like Kathleen Kennedy takes over. By the way, Kathleen Kennedy, a fantastic hire. She has an incredible run in Hollywood. Her as a producer, and what she's been involved with, and how she worked her way up in the industry and ended up working with some of the greatest filmmakers the world has ever seen. You cannot. Her reputation is unassailable. Now, maybe she's not a great friend to creatives because she's used to working with people that already had their creative juices sorted and knew what they were doing. That's what she's not used to, having to manage people that can't live up to their end of the bargain. And I think you were very astute when you said that Lord and Miller were guys that, based on what you had seen on the DVD, that was a really astute assessment, that they were unable to work with storyboards. I mean, anyone who knows anything about Star Wars, first of all, knows, I know as a 10-year-old, I could have told you, you got to storyboard these scenes. You can't make a movie like you can't make a Star Wars film without storyboards and now animatics, because they've got visual effects. That's not how it works. You can't fly by the seat of your pants when you're making a Star Wars movie. There's too many things that have to be planned. You can't just make it up as you go. And to have a lot of improv and throw the script away, you've got many department heads that are suddenly like, well, wait a minute, this isn't what we talked about. This is not on the script. This is not what we've broken down. You as directors owe it to your department heads to be sure that we're all on the same page every day. You can't just go off book. That's not how Star Wars movies are made. So you can't blame Kathleen Kennedy for that. She was trying to hire new people, new innovative people that she hoped would bring the same kind of creative energy that she was used to working with for the better part of 3 decades. And she tried. She tried on numerous occasions, and it didn't work out. And in her experience, she'd never seen it not work out that way. So people talk about her stewardship it wasn't that way. I mean, she was based on spreadsheets and making decisions that she thought were good ones. They turned out to not be good ones, but not because she was wrong. And I think that that's something that people need to remember. And again, I'm a huge admirer of Kathleen Kennedy, and not because now people are going to say, "Oh, you're a shill." I'm not a shill. I'm not interested in no one's going to give me a job working on Star Wars movies unless I've done something, that will somehow perhaps be, wildly successful. Then maybe somebody will call me in for a meeting. I mean, that's how things work in the business. I mean, you can't be a shill. You can't suck up your way into a job directing a major motion picture. That's not how it works. Now I've got a couple more letters I want to read. Let's see. This one, all the way, once again, a longtime viewer and member of the Post-Geek Singularity community, comes from Dieter Bastian, who always writes good letters, all the way from Germany. Dieter here. Greetings, Rob. Since we're pretty close in age and I'm just one day ahead of you in terms of our birthdays, it makes it easy for me to remember yours. So happy birthday, Rob, and congrats for reaching the 10,000 YouTube subscribers milestone. Watch out, Campia. There's a new player in town. His name is RMB. Thankfully, John and I kind of are doing different things, and I'm proud to be working with him. I know we both have one foot in the grave, but I hope you will give the Grim Reaper the middle finger for a long time and say, "Not today, buddy. I got a YouTube show to do." If he comes a knocking, don't let him tempt you to buy his presumably cool hot toy figure at your doorstep, even if he sits on the Iron Throne. It's a knockoff, Rob. It's a knockoff, Rob, and would seal the deal. But if you couldn't help yourself and bought the figure anyway because of that nice chair and you travel to hell, Perhaps your positivity would give the devil a headache, and he'll send you to the good place immediately. Great TV show, by the way. It is a great TV show. Spoiler alert. On the other hand, I can see you shoveling the coal down there to keep it nice and warm and hot. Man, I'm real sweaty down here. Has anyone seen my Lucky Tiger grooming products? Why am I here anyway, you would ask? Because you are a destroyer of joy, shouts the gatekeeper of hell. Except if the Lord of Darkness hates Star Trek Discovery 2, then I'm pretty sure you will make it far down there and perhaps even will hold all writers of the show accountable for what they have done. There's going to be hell to pay. Rob's going to tear your souls apart. Live long and prosper, Rob, no matter where. Best regards, Dieter Bastian. Well, Dieter, thank you for that. That was definitely an amusing letter. But, oh, you know what? Listen to this. This just came in over the transom. Check this out. I got this letter from Sideshow. Your Thanos 6th scale figure will be arriving in our warehouse in approximately 7 days. Your final payment is scheduled for Wednesday, May 22nd. Oh, great. I hope Mom sent me a check. Thanks for that, Sideshow. Gilbert, please. Gilbert he always barks at the, and the thing is, he likes the landscapers. He thinks they're fun. Now, I have another letter, a letter that, again, for my birthday, I was kind of hoping this would happen. My final letter of the day. It's another long letter. But because it's my birthday, I was hoping a letter would arrive from the great Willow Yang. For those of you who don't know Willow Yang is a PhD. She's getting her PhD in Canada. She's going to become a microbiologist. She's 4 years into her PhD, and she writes great letters. And for those of you who have not heard a letter from Willow Yang before, this one's pretty damn funny. Now, for those of you who don't know, I was talking about, a while back about War of the Worlds. Now, if you haven't seen War of the Worlds, either the 1953 Byron Haskin directed version produced by George Pal, or the Spielberg directed Tom Cruise version from this century, well, at the end of the movie, spoiler alert, the aliens are defeated by Earth diseases, the common cold, basically. And Willow, being who she is, has written this letter. And I'm so happy to read this on my birthday. This was like a birthday present. Greetings, Rob. Can viruses save us in the event of an alien invasion? Here's my 2 cents on the topic. I think the answer is wholly dependent on whether aliens have the same evolutionary origins as us. Did we share a common ancestor with them at one point? Maybe the aliens originated from Earth and departed from our planet millions of years ago. Alternatively, maybe Earth life originated from colonization by ancient aliens. In either case, if we did, in fact, have a common ancestor, then our cellular replication machinery would be conserved, making it theoretically possible for a strain of virus from Earth to be able to take advantage of these new hosts. Most likely, however, viruses will require a period of adaptation to the alien cells, so will presumably need to hold out for a few years before an epidemic helps turn the tide of war. Assuming that aliens are indeed hostile, of course, and not like the ones from District 9. But what if the aliens evolved independently from Earth life? Would our viruses still be able to infect them? This actually harkens to a question that many evolutionary biologists are trying to answer right now, which is, how repeatable is evolution? Is it feasible for life to evolve on another planet and still arrive at a solution that's so similar to ours that an Earth virus would still be able to hijack and exploit their cellular replication machinery? Of course, we don't have an actual answer. We can only speculate. Before I proceed, however, I'll first provide an extremely simplified explanation on how life is encoded on Earth. The key building block of life is proteins. These molecules are essential for almost all functions, including structure, transport, catalytic activities, immune responses, and much more. A protein consists of a sequence of amino acids, which dictates the way the protein folds into a three-dimensional structure, which in turn determines its function. The information to producing the correct sequence of amino acids is encoded in DNA. DNA contains 4 nitrogenous bases, uh, ad- adrenine, adenine, adenine A, guanine G, thymine, and cytosine. I think I got those right. Thus, a strand of DNA encoding a protein, which is called a gene, consists of a sequence of A's, G's, T's, and C's. On Earth, a sequence of 3 bases form a codon to which a single amino acid is designed. For instance, the codon ATG corresponds to the amino acid methionine, the codon CAT histidine, the codon AAT asparagine. Hence, if you have a gene region that's ATG, CAT, AAT, it will get made into a protein with the amino acid sequence methylene histidine asparagine. Gene? Histogene? I don't know. Willa, you're killing me here. Now, I won't speculate on whether alternative life forms that don't require DNA or proteins are feasible. That's a debate for experts far more intelligent than I am. Needless to say, if our alien invaders aren't a protein-based life form, they'll be impervious to our viruses, which need to hijack a host's protein manufacturing system in order to propagate. However, even if aliens do have DNA and proteins, I'm still dubious on whether their system will evolve to the same endpoint as Earth's. For instance, the majority of Earth's life forms possess a set of 20 amino acids. However, it is quite possible that an altered set can also emerge. There are, in fact, organisms that incorporate cellocysteine and pyrrolysine into their proteins, 2 additional amino acids outside of the standard 20. I think it's quite feasible that an alien lineage could evolve a different set from us, perhaps one with more or fewer than 20 amino acids, and perhaps even one containing amino acids that don't occur naturally on Earth. The biggest question that I have, however, is whether our genetic code will be the same. There are definitely patterns to how codons are paired with amino acids. However, mathematically, there are over 10 to the power of 84, aka one septuagentillion possible coding systems available if we adhere to the rule of a 3 base codons for a set of 20 amino acids. It's highly implausible for evolution to explore every possible option and select the best one, nor does it need to. Evolution doesn't always find the best solution, one that's just good enough. I personally subscribe to Francis Crick's frozen accident theory, which postulates that the allocation of amino acids to codons occurred at least in part through chance events during the early evolution of the genetic code and was subsequently inherited by all life on Earth via common descent. I suspect that if evolution was to replay again, a wholly different genetic code will arise. For instance, CAT might not code for histidine anymore, but for tryptophan. And if this does happen, if the aliens have in fact evolved a different coding system from us, then it'll be impossible for a virus to hijack their machinery. Their genes won't get made into the correct proteins. It's like Homer Simpson trying to assemble a barbecue grill using an instruction manual that's written in French, i.e., grill? What the hell is that? The Earth virus is essentially giving the aliens cell instructions in a language that the latter doesn't speak. Thus, in the event of invasion by aliens whom we don't share common ancestry with, I'll actually be hedging my bets on pathogens like bacteria or archaea, which don't depend on a host's replication machinery. All they need is a body to colonize. Instead of the world getting saved by influenza, maybe we'll get saved by E. coli. I know that this is a long letter already, but I'd just like to briefly discuss the repeatability of evolution. It is actually a question that our lab seeks to understand. Is evolution more deterministic and therefore likely repeatable, or is it more stochastic and unpredictable? I need to check a thesaurus after this, man. One of the key figures behind this question is Stephen Jay Gould. In his book, Wonderful Life, Gould discusses the Burgess Shale in Alberta, which contains the fossils of a multitude of organisms from the Cambrian era. The types of body plans that existed during this time appear more diverse and disparate than the ones that exist in the modern day. You have creatures like the Opabina, for instance, which has 5 eyes and a frontal nozzle. Why is it that many of these body parts didn't survive to the modern day? Gould hypothesized that it wasn't because the body plans that went extinct were bad and therefore got outcompeted by the better ones. Rather, he argued that it was due to stochastic forces and chance events that allowed one organism to survive and another to go extinct, in spite of the two being equally well adapted. In another timeline, the descendants of Opabinia could have just as easily survived instead of Pikaia, the ancestor of the vertebrates, and organisms today would have 5 eyes. I like to consider life evolving on another planet as an alternate timeline. And yes, I do think that extraterrestrial life exists. It is probable that in this timeline, evolution finds a different solution, giving rise to a system distinct from the one that we know on Earth. As Gould predicts, replay the tape 1,000,000 times from a Burgess beginning, and I doubt that anything like Homo sapiens would ever evolve again. It is indeed a wonderful life. Yours sincerely, Willow. I wonder if there's anybody left in this chat after this letter. But I love this letter, and I love Willow Yang, and I'm still waiting for her analysis of Space Seed, because she has finished, I would presume, watching the first season of the original series. But this is why I love you guys here in the Post-Geek Singularity, because I get letters like this. I get all kinds of letters. We can talk about fandom on one hand and incels. I didn't get into talking about incels in the last letter, which is a whole different phenomenon. I didn't want to get into that. But the point about sex workers being readily available, and I think that, just as an aside, I don't think that the incel community is necessarily looking for sex. I think, like all of us, they're looking for love. I really believe that. And whether that's going to happen, it's hard for me to say. I don't know. Let's see what you guys have to say. I know that I've been going on and on and on. Wow, there's a lot of people here. A lot of people are asking questions. Marvel Man says, "Are you a big comic book reader, Rob? Suggestions." Boy, oh boy. It depends. I mean, it depends what kind of, like, if you want to read a great slice of life comic that has become classic, Love and Rockets. I really enjoyed. Cerebus the Aardvark. Dave Sims' long-running comic. That's a great comic. Ghost World, great comic. But I think you probably are asking about superhero comics. And look, some of my favorite superhero comics of all time, the original Mensch Sienkiewicz run of Moon Knight, the George Perez, Marv Wolfman, New Teen Titans, the Frank Miller books, such as Ronin, his run on Daredevil, Dark Knight Returns, Watchmen, anything Alan Moore has written, whether it's Swamp Thing, whether it's Promethea, whether it's Watchmen, whether it's V for Vendetta, even Superman. What do you get for the man who has everything, or whatever happened to the Man of Tomorrow? The other one is also great as well. There's so many great comics. There's so many great Marvel and DC comics and independent comics. I love American Flag, that was published by First. Boom Studios and Image Comics are producing comics now that are fantastic. I mean, there's so many different comics out there. What you have to ask yourself, if you really want to get into reading comics, the best way to start reading comics is to first ask yourself, what is it you're interested in? And then I would say, if you want to read superhero comics, then you have to ask yourself, okay, do you want to read the characters that you already know? Do you want to read Superman, Batman? Do you want to read the Avengers? Do you want to read the Justice League? Do you want to read Wonder Woman? Then you can start doing searches. Go on the internet, do Google searches. What are the 5 best Superman graphic novels that you need to read? But if you're not interested in superheroes, Mouse, Art Spiegelman's Mouse, which is a story about the Holocaust through the eyes of mice, but it's of course an allegory. The Mouse Guard, which is a comic I really liked, that was going to be made into a movie that got canceled. I mean, you really have to ask yourself, whatever you're interested in. I mean, if you get into like Japanese comics, you can find manga about golf if you want. You have to ask yourself, what is it that you are interested in, and begin a search there. So I can give you examples of I told somebody, if they've never read a Marvel comic book, what Marvel comic book should they start with if they're familiar already with the MCU? And I would say Alex Ross came to prominence by he painted, his artwork is incredible. There's a series called Marvels that I've always recommended, because it's basically a man on the street examination of the Marvel universe, and it's quite excellent. But good luck, and report back when you've started your journey. I'd love to hear. Send me a letter or come into these chats and tell me what it is you're reading. Jim Boyers, one of my moderators here, says, happy birthday, Rob. Jim Boyers was also Officer Boyers at one time. So, you got to be on the straight and narrow, because Jim has insight, man. He knows if he pulls you over and you say something that isn't believable, he knows. Raven says, just FYI, my Scotch quote from the John Campea show is Mr. Mom. Oh, man, I never would have got that. That was a good quote, though. I never would have got that. John Suttress is here. By the way, John of the Word Balloon podcast did his latest podcast with John Price and Larry. It's a Star Trek podcast. It's a podcast about the state of the Star Trek universe. It's over 2 hours long. Go look up the Word Balloon podcast. It's a great podcast. This new one with Larry and John on the state, and John and Larry. You gotta listen to it. The State of the Star Trek podcast. It's a great particular podcast if you're interested in Star Trek, as I am. But check out the Word Balloon podcast. It's great. Happy birthday. Have a nice beer or dessert on me. Comic book questions. Are you reading Tom King's Batman or Bendis's Superman runs? Thoughts on John Hickman, Jason Aaron, Jeff Lemire. Okay, first of all, I love Hickman. As a matter of fact, I'm rereading. Hickman wrote Infinity, right? The Thanos. That's what I'm reading now. I'm going back and reading the Infinity. I've read the Infinity Gauntlet, but I'm going back. I only read Infinity once. I'm rereading that now. And Jason Aaron and Jeff Lemire, I mean, great writers. Actually, you pick up anything by them, great stuff. I've not read Tom King's Batman, but people keep telling me to read it. But again, I don't buy individual books anymore. I buy collected editions, usually the hardcover collected editions. So that's why I wait, which is kind of a bummer. Raven said, let's talk Newsroom. That show is brilliant. I love the Newsroom. For those of you who don't know what Newsroom is, it was an Aaron Sorkin show. You can go, there's a very famous clip about why America isn't the greatest country in the world. And the main character, played by Jeff Daniels, delivers this great speech. And it's basically an indictment of America, but it also was written and I think performed. And Sorkin wanted us to take stock in what was good about America, but also to know what we can change. It's a great speech. Go look it up. Came from the Newsroom. It's awesome. Jason Bonner says, or it's Bonner, right? James says, I say Jason. James Bonner says, just watch Spirited Away. Spirited Away, it's another great Miyazaki film. It's great. I think it was Princess Mononoke, Spirited Away, Howl's Moving Castle. Those were all brought to America. John Lasseter got those brought to America and released. Big fan of Spirited Away. It's great. Raven says, what software does John use to show the SCs, the super chats on the screen? I sent a chat to you the other day and you missed it. Not a big deal. Was not important. I use the same software. It's just a question of sometimes I get talking and I miss it. I have the same software that he's using now, and he's also using Wirecast. And I bounce around, so I apologize if I miss your super chat. I just tell me, and I try and not miss everyone's super chats. Stubble McShave says, sorry about throwing you under the bus on the John Campea show. No worries, man. It's all in good fun. I am if not tickled that you did that. I thought that was great. And you know what? It just fosters more of a sense of community amongst everyone. Raven said, if I sent you a long email about what I expected to see at the end of episode 3 and how it could have been better, would you care to read it? I'd absolutely read it. But if it better be good. If it's good, I'll read it on the show. But please tell me if you want me to read it. Terry Flynn says, Rob, please make Girls on Top required viewing before anyone mentions woke. Tracy Ullman was a pioneer of female comedy on UK television in the early 80s, akin to TOS in quality. Your tweet was great. Really interesting. So I tweeted a first of all, uh, a friend of mine, longtime friend on Twitter. She's a woman of color, LGBT. Actually, I don't know if she'd say that she was strictly LGBT. I think she's, let's just put it that she's a very open-minded woman of color. She and I see eye to eye on many things. She sent me this very funny, I thought it was very funny, a Tracy Ullman sketch about a woke therapy. A therapist is seeing a group together and talking about being woke, and I thought it was very funny, and I retweeted it. And a lot of people, man, have been coming after me on both sides of the aisle, but mostly, as wasn't very surprising, people people I thought were on my side of the aisle, saying that this was making fun of being woke, and it's somehow making fun of the plight of people that deserve inclusion and recognition and all that. And I'm just like, really? I mean, this was something in my mind, like with everything else. If you have to walk around and call yourself woke, and you're saying you're woke, I think you're missing the point. I think whether or not you're woke is evident in the actions that you take. If you are truly somebody who's fighting for social justice, and you're fighting for your fellow man, and you're fighting for representation, and you're fighting for rights, you don't have to tell me that you are. You don't have to tell me how woke you are and how less woke I am, or that come at me and say, well, you're a white cis male. I'm like, you know what? I can't help how I was born into the world. I can't help. All I can do is through my actions try and make the world a better place from my vantage point. And my vantage point is doing this channel and trying to be inclusive and share ideas and make this place a place where I don't care. Frankly, to be honest, I don't care what color you are. I don't care what your sexual orientation is. I don't care what your religious beliefs are. I don't care what your nationality is. I don't care. Everyone's welcome here. Everyone's welcome here. All I ask is that you be respectful of everybody else here and contribute something meaningful to this conversation. Everyone's welcome. I don't. That's what I'm looking. That's what I'm looking to do is create an environment where you're all welcome here, as long as you interact in a respectful manner with every other person that's here of our wondrous, diverse, crazy humanity. And we all love science fiction, fantasy, and horror. That's what I'm interested in. If you have to come at me and tell me that I'm a middle-aged cis white male and what do I know about being woke? Well, I'll tell you. What I know about being woke is my corner of the universe that's right here. That's where you are right now. You imagination connoisseurs of this post-geek singularity community, you're all welcome. I want to make this a place where you can all come and enjoy. Doesn't matter what your backgrounds are. It doesn't matter what you look like. It doesn't matter what your religious beliefs are. None of that matters. All that matters is that you're here for the free exchange of ideas and that you respect everybody else that's here. That's it. And that's what I would like to see our world become, a place where we can have the free-flowing exchange of ideas without saying that, oh, you know, my ideas about how social justice should be administered are better than yours. I mean, that doesn't, you know, my question is, if we're all here, why don't we all have a discussion? Everybody should be heard, and we should create an environment where everybody feels they can be heard. That's what I'm interested in. But man, on Twitter, I was going back and forth, and I was being attacked by people that I bet would believe the same things that I believe, and yet they see me posting this sketch as some kind of an attack on them. Worse yet, an attack on being woke and marginalizing people. I'm like, you know what people need? A fucking sense of humor. Because I don't want to live in a world where everybody is included and everybody's equal, but no one has a sense of humor. We're all walking around morose on eggshells, afraid to talk to people, afraid to talk about those funny, crazy things about the human condition that we will all recognize. But anyway, Terry, I'm glad. I love Tracy Ullman. I thought she was a groundbreaking. It's very funny that Tracy Ullman, one of the great female comedians who has been groundbreaking for her entire career, somehow a sketch that she's done is getting pilloried by the progressive left. This is the problem, people. This is the problem. I just don't get it. Stubble McShave says, thoughts on Picard going to Amazon instead of Netflix. Very interesting. I think Netflix was a little burned by Star Trek Discovery, despite what anybody says, because if it was a resounding success for them, remember, Netflix is the company that paid $100 million to keep Friends on Netflix for 1 year. Here's a brand new Star Trek show starring Patrick Stewart, and Netflix didn't want it, which means it's too rich for Netflix's blood, which means Star Trek Discovery was not the success that everybody thinks it was. There's a reason why Amazon outbid Netflix, or maybe Netflix didn't even want it. Who knows? I don't know what the machinations were behind it, but it's very, very interesting that Amazon Amazon has a business to support beyond Netflix. They only have their subscribers and their shows, and hopefully they can have more subscribers. But Amazon has another business, a very lucrative business, a global business, to back up whatever it is they're spending on the Lord of the Rings TV series, which they spent $250 million just to acquire the rights, or the Picard show. So interesting. I think that it's, on one hand, I don't think it's necessarily, it has anything to do with the quality of the show that we're going to get. Again, on paper, the Star Trek Picard show ticks a lot of boxes. Will it be good for the fan base? Will people like the Picard series? Will I like the Picard series? I'm going to withhold judgment until I see it, as I think everybody should. I know that there's the same tumultuous goings on in the writer's room and with the showrunners as there was with Star Trek Discovery. Different reasons, but still, what is the Picard show lacking? A single vision. A strong showrunner that has a single vision. There are many different visions in the room for the Picard series, beginning with Patrick Stewart, who is an executive producer on the show. So he's being given, look, I love actors. I do. But actors don't necessarily always have the greatest intentions when it comes to telling an overall story, because actors, by definition, are really only interested in their characters. So they're not thinking big picture. They're thinking about their own characters. I never think it's a great idea to include the lead actor of a series to develop the direction of that series when it's being developed. But that's just me. Lone Wolf X6 says, hey, Rob, are you excited to see Crisis on Infinite Earths? And do you think it would happen in the DCEU first and not the Arrowverse? I'm shocked they're doing it on TV first. So what Lone Wolf is saying, for those of you who are comic book fans, when I was reading comic books voraciously, when I was going to the comic book store every Wednesday and buying stacks and stacks of books, I would say my biggest comic book buying in my life was between 1983 and probably 2005. So during that period of time, I was very much into buying comic books every week, following everything. And in 1985, DC Comics had Crisis on Infinite Earths. That was done by the New Teen Titans team of Marv Wolfman and George Perez, which was at the time the two hottest creators at DC. And it was a 12-issue miniseries that involved every single DC character. And they tried to take their unruly multiverse and cram it into something that was more manageable for new readers. So new readers could jump on, and they didn't have to read about the cosmic treadmill or understand the difference between Earth 1 and Earth 2, and why is the JSA different than Justice League of America. And it was amazing. And it was one of the, like, it was a comic book event. As a comic reader, I loved it. It was like, Infinity War and Endgame, but in comic books. Of course, Infinity War and Endgame are based in comics that were events like Crisis on Infinite Earths. And as we know, on the CW, they have done crossovers amongst all the shows. Now, without saying, I'm not even going to say how I know this or where this came from. The plans, the ambition behind what they want to do with the CW Crisis on Infinite Earths crossover, which is harking back to this famous comic series that's now over 30 years old, is amazing. And I will say, if they're able to pull off even half of what they're aspiring to do, it's going to make television history. And I can't say anything more than that because I don't want to get people's hopes up. But when I heard the plans, and this comes from people who know, they're pretty extraordinary what they're trying to do. More extraordinary than you might even think. And when I heard it, I was like, really? So I am very, very excited, Lone Wolf X6, about this crossover and what they're trying to do. And if they pull it off, like, you're going to be like, oh my God, no way. but we'll see. And if they don't, I'll tell you what they were trying to do, because they are trying to do something that's very, very extraordinary. Stubble McShave says there haven't been much interpersonal relationships between characters in the Star Wars sequels. The original series had more friendship, betrayal, and redemption. Look, I agree. The problem, I think, with the Star Wars, if you watch The Force Awakens, I don't know what the story actually is. I mean, they're trying to find Luke, and then there's Rey, who's in the desert, who it's not like Rey doesn't really know who she is, and it's all sort of, it seems very random to me. There's the story is, and it certainly wasn't. The Last Jedi suddenly became the story of Luke, and then Rose and Finn off on Canto Bight. It was, I don't know, and I think again, the story of these three movies should have been mapped out first, and we should have been following a narrative that we had investment in. I have no investment in the narrative of the episode 9. I'll watch it. I'm curious to see, well, what are they going to do with it? But when I see, once again, I see ships on a desert environment, really, again? I mean, one of the cool things about the Star Wars movies is if you look at the first movie, you get Tatooine, and then you get the Death Star, you get Yavin, you know, and then in Empire Strikes Back, you get Hoth, you get Dagobah, you get Bespin, which were very different looking than Tatooine. And then in Return of the Jedi, we have to go back to Tatooine, I guess. Everything in Jedi was a rehash. And then we get Endor, the Forest Moon. That was cool. I mean, it wasn't as cool as, say, Bespin, but it was cool that they filmed it in the Forest Moon. But we've got these desert environments. I would have thought, especially with the effects technology, say what you want about the prequel trilogy, but going from everything from Geonosis to going to Naboo to going to Camino, there was different. We traveled around the universe. You got a sense you were living someplace. Now we're getting more footage of them battling in the desert again. Like, what's up with the desert, man? Like, why not go back to Coruscant? What's going on there? But I agree, Stubble. Not so great. Willow Yang, happy birthday, Rob. I wish I could afford to send you an actual Neo hot toy, but feel free to count this super chat towards. Oh my God, Willow. Wow. Live long and prosper. What you need to send me is a pronunciation guide. First of all, that was incredibly generous of you. Thank you very much. I very much appreciate that support for the channel. But seriously, a pronunciation. Next time when you send me a letter like this, please just send me a little bit of a pronunciation guide. So a Luddite like myself, well, maybe not such a Luddite. What would you? And I'm a science proponent. I just need a little pronunciation guide. Now I have to go back and I should have been more prepared. It's not. You know what? It shouldn't be. You know what? It shouldn't be your problem to give me a pronunciation guide. I should be the one doing the work. I should have read your letter. I started reading your letter. I didn't read the whole thing in advance, and I should have. I'm so excited to read your letters. That was bad. You know what? It's up to me to learn how to pronounce the things that you send me. It's not, you've already sent me the letter. That's your schooling to me. It's up for me to meet you halfway. Thank you very much for that. The super chat is great. And please, I love your letters. Keep them coming. I can't wait. You have to write an analysis of Space Seed and City on the Edge of Forever. I'm very curious to hear what you think. I've loved your letters, and you're one of the reasons that has made doing these chats and things so enjoyable, because your letters are so much fun to read. They're so cogent and insightful, and I would love to one day just get you hammered. Like, we could sit. I can't even imagine the conversation. I bet you and I, what we got to do is we got to get, like, are you in Toronto? There's got to be some great bars in Toronto. What we got to do is get like a bunch of people and meet up and just plan to like drink all afternoon in some bar. And I can only imagine we'll have to pace ourselves. Like, I don't want to get like slurringly drunk. I want to be able to pick a keen mind like yours of all things genre and science. I think that would be great. Lone Wolf X6 says, happy birthday, Rob. Well, thank you very much. But so Willow, one day, but keep the letters coming. Don't think just because you sent me a very generous super chat, and that was very generous. Thank you so much. But you're not off the hook, because your letters give me reason to do these chats. I love them. I do love them. Doshi's here. Doshi, how are you? Hope all is well with you. I'm glad you're still alive. Happy birthday. You convinced me to get Alien on 4K. Look, if you've got a 4K TV and you've got a 4K player, the Alien 4K disc is like $15. That's not even 2 double Jamesons at your local bar, depending on what country you are in from. Maybe is Jameson cheaper in Ireland? I imagine that my dream of going to Ireland and I want to walk around the country, literally walk around the country, with a tent. Sometimes I'll stay at inns, but I want to go to every distillery and drink every kind of hooch that you can get. Maybe I'll take a year off or something. Alexander Wilson says, you said Star Trek Discovery was the most expensive television show in history, but I read in Fortune that the upcoming season of The Crown was the most expensive at 157 million. Well, that could be true. But I'll tell you something. If you look at, there was 15 episodes of Star Trek Discovery in the first season. They all cost more than $10 million. All of them. And then they also had the startup costs for the show and when they scrapped it. So I'll bet you, because they're not announcing how much it cost, but I'll bet you that the first season of Star Trek Discovery was more expensive than $157 million by a wide margin. I think that they've spent, I wouldn't be surprised if they spent close to $350 million on all of Star Trek Discovery so far, if not more. Vegetable Tube says Patrick Stewart pushing for Picard to be more like Ben Kingsley's sexy beast role. Laugh out loud. Well, I'm sure, because see, the problem is, here's the problem: a television show cannot just be about your principal actor. Again, you have to put your characters before everything, and the characters have to be informed by, of course, your lead role. But when the lead role, when your actor is telling you what kind of stories that they want, then it becomes not about the show, it becomes about the lead actor, and that becomes, I think, problematic in the long run. What you want to do is you want to service the character, but the character needs to be also in the service of a larger vision. And I know for a fact that the original vision that was pitched to the Picard series has morphed and altered by the input of various people. And that's never a good sign. Alexander Wilson says AT&T, CBS, and the CW have cut ties with Netflix today. Did they really? I haven't read that. What's the future of Netflix without licensed content? Man, that is really interesting. CBS cut ties with Netflix. Man, I haven't read that. Oh my God, I really want to go. That's got to be a Deadline article. That's huge because, the Warner streaming service, it makes sense to me. CBS has their own streaming service. And if CBS has a deal with Indeed, has a deal with Amazon, AT&T is Warner Brothers. So CW is also Warner Brothers. So that makes sense. I don't know about CBS, but that's huge for Netflix because, look, Netflix, as we know, some of their biggest content is legacy content from other providers like Friends, like The Office. And I think I've always said Netflix is on shaky ground. They're leveraged to the hilt. They've borrowed billions and billions of dollars. And yes, they could put a moratorium on their spending and they could just wait and earn their money back based on what they have now, I suppose. But their model of killing shows after 3 seasons because they don't want to have to pay, they don't want to have to pay those creators to re-up is sort of a strange model to me. I mean, Netflix, they're gonna look. We're in the middle of a giant sea change in the entertainment business. A lot of big things are happening. It's all going to shake out, but we're going through an evolution. I don't know. Wow, that's really interesting. By the way, Vegetable Tube, thank you too for the generous super chat. I don't know. Wow, I want to go read about that. I haven't read about that today. I've been so inundated with work, but that's pretty interesting. Magic K says, happy birthday, R&B. Did you catch the Marvel announcement yesterday that was comic related? No, I think I guess I've been missing out because I've been working on the show and also Tango Shalom. I'm dealing with sound issues and been working on the film a lot. Dan V900 said Finn's story in The Force Awakens should have been about The Force Awakens should have been about seeking revenge on Poe while forgiving him in the end for what he did with his best friend dying in his arms, which is from a book set before The Force Awakens. It was lazy. Look, I agree. I mean, I think the idea, Finn's story of a stormtrooper who suddenly had a crisis of conscience, watching people be massacred and then leaving the order. What a great idea for a story. And I haven't seen that much of that. I mean, the setup for his character was so good. We'd never seen that before. And it was I thought we were going to get an exploration of what does it mean to be a stormtrooper. how to, once you move away from, say, the clones, like in the Clone Wars, and they were recruiting people, what does that mean? If you're a young kid and you get recruited and you don't even have an identity of your own? I mean, there was so many interesting things. I was very excited when I saw the movie and they began Finn with that story. I thought that was really, really interesting. I would have liked to have seen so much more with that, and we didn't see it. But maybe they'll do that. I mean, it's going to be a little too late, but maybe we'll get more of that in episode 9, because the way he's been written is a little generic. Doshi says, I'm okay. Alexa wanted to smoke weed with me. Well, I hope you and Alexa, what is your weed of choice? Can you get weed for free? I mean, is it medicinal? Is it part of your healthcare? Can you do that? I don't know. I really don't. Let's see. Well, what we got here? I'm looking at everybody's. Let's see. Mike Bodden says, I've looked and not seen anything about CBS cutting ties with Netflix. If someone has any insight. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I know that CBS has, they took Star Trek Discovery, or Star Trek the Picard, whatever the Picard series is called, was taken to Amazon. But that's one thing, and that's a big deal. But I haven't heard anything other than that. That's interesting. Alexander Wilson says maybe that's why the Picard series is on Amazon and Netflix is blocking CBS All Access from reviving One Day at a Time. Seems like they are the enemy now. Well, maybe they're One Day. For those of you who don't know, One Day at a Time was a reboot, a Hispanic version of the original One Day at a Time, and Norman Lear, the original creator, came back and worked on it. He famously talked about Rita Moreno was involved with that show as well. I really liked the new One Day at a Time. I thought it was a great series, and Netflix killed it after 3 seasons because their model, what they want to do is, Netflix is not interested in cultivating water cooler shows like Game of Thrones that go on for 8 seasons, because with their model, it doesn't necessarily benefit them. Or at least they've come to this conclusion. So they took over Travelers, Eric McCormack's science fiction show out of Canada that I actually enjoyed. I thought the 3rd season, it's not the greatest show in the world, but I thought it was interesting. And I really wanted to see where it goes. And the 3rd season, which I thought was great, ended. I mean, it ended, but I was hoping, wow, I'm like, where are they going to go? And they had acquired it. It was a co-production. And then they acquired the whole thing for the 3rd season. And then they killed it off. And they did the same thing with Santa Clarita Diet. They did the same thing with One Day at a Time. I didn't realize that. I'm going to have to look into this. I mean, that's interesting that they wanted to acquire, CBS All Access wanted to acquire it. Look, the name of the game now, all these players are trying to figure out how to make things work. CBS All Access, they've got the CBS library, but they don't have that many new shows. And they've got The Good Fight. They've got the new Star Trek shows that are all going to be made there. But I found it interesting that, in the rest of the world, CBS All Access is allowing Amazon to take over. I'm sure Amazon paid them a ton of money because they have the money to do it. Lone Wolf times 6 x6. Lone Wolf times 6 says, Rob, you are the Flash and Campia is Green Arrow for my movie news. You're not just heroes to me, you're legends. Watching your shows makes me happy and battle my issues in life. Thank you. Well, Lone Wolf times 6. Thank you. I mean, I appreciate the support of the channel. It's fun. I feel very fortunate that as a middle-aged old man with one foot in the grave, that I have this opportunity to be talking to all of you and have this community being built and have everyone coming in here and sharing what they love, because after all, that's what we're here for. I mean, the whole reason to tell stories is to communicate our experiences to the rest of the world and hope that the rest of the world takes something away from it that's of value. When I made Free Enterprise 20 years ago, there was a lot of people that said, "Oh, you put my life on screen," and that was gratifying. And Free Enterprise, I wish we had put it out. I would have had more of a career. Hopefully, I'll if it had come out a little later when the internet was a little bigger, maybe this geek culture of ours, we imagination connoisseurs, I would have had more of an imprint. And maybe the movie just wasn't that good, which is why I'm trying to get it back. I can make it better. Although I'll tell you, there's jokes in the movie. I was looking at it the other day because I was seeing what I would cut and change and trying to make a list and talk about being woke. There's a lot of things in free enterprise that would piss people off today, but I wouldn't cut them. But it'd be a little controversial. But yeah, I appreciate you saying that. I mean, I think that John and I, we're talking about what we love. And like I've always said, this is a luxury. We have a luxury to be imagination connoisseurs, to have time to read books and consume comics and watch movies and live in a world where all of these things are at our fingertips, and we have this kind of technology. I mean, if I had this technology when I was a kid, man, I would be 13 years old and I would be heavily invested in Bitcoin. I would have all kinds of investments all over the world. I would be on my game, man. Because at 13, I knew everything. It's amazing what we have today, and we're able to build this community. So it's great. And I thank you for saying that, and I really appreciate you being here and being part of the Post-Geek Singularity community. Let's see. Topher Rock says, "Happy birthday, Rob. I have been a proud viewer since Chat 1. Loved watching you since 2015. I don't always agree with you, but you always have a logical and well thought through reason for how you're feeling. Sometimes I don't, but I appreciate you saying that. You can call me out. I don't mind. But I appreciate you being here, and all the way from I didn't know it was going to happen. And people were always like, you should start your own channel. I'm like, ugh. And it was funny because I thought, I'm going to make Robservations. I'm going to make the first episode of, they were not the live show, but my first episode, and still the only episode. I've got to finish the Diane Duane episode of Robservations. I spent a long time editing and shooting and working on it on my spare time. And, it was different, but I thought that's what I was going to do, these hour-long documentaries. And that sort of fell by the wayside. It's interesting. But thanks for being here. I appreciate you watching. It's great to have an audience that continues to tune in. Magic K says, quick recap. X-Men line relaunch, another X-Men relaunch with Jonathan Hickman, a Carnage event. Julia Powers and Alex Powers joins Future Foundation, and Louise Simonson writes Power Pack again? Well, that's pretty cool. I used to love Power Pack. I have all the issues of the first series. I mean, is there only one? I don't remember, but I have the first run of Power Pack. I love Power Pack. Wow, the X-Men line relaunch. What does that mean? I mean, I like Hickman a lot, but a Carnage event. Okay. I got to read about this X-Men event. Doshi says weed is legal in Canada. I can buy it in a store. We can buy it here too. Yeah, it's weed. I was never a weed guy. I was more of a cocaine ecstasy guy. Don't repeat that. I don't do drugs anymore. Too old. Now it's strictly Jameson or better whiskeys. That's what I like. I like whiskey, Irish whiskey. Sign Cassandra, one of my favorite names for anyone here. Sign Cassandra says, why do you think Firefly and Serenity was never developed further? I really would love more stories. Happy birthday. Sign Cassandra, I think a lot of people, all the brown coats out there, are asking themselves that same question. Brown coats, by the way, are Firefly Serenity fans. I guess after the jacket that Malcolm Reynolds wore. I don't know. I really liked Firefly a lot. I don't think it was ever given its due. I think if they tried to put it on now, it would probably do a lot better. I love the cast. I love the characters. I thought Firefly was great. I love the milieu. It also made sense to me that I like the idea that China became such a player on the earth that it harks back to this series of books called Chung Kuo, that was basically a future alternate history of the future where China became the dominant force on the planet, which is probably going to happen. And I like the fact that Firefly incorporated that. I thought it was good. I don't know why, though. I mean, people love Firefly, and I find it interesting. I mean, maybe the Serenity, again, it all, unfortunately, always comes down to money. Money, and if something turns out to be good or not. And I think frequently, I don't think Joss Whedon, I don't think Firefly was ever treated well. And then, of course, the Serenity movie didn't exactly live up to the expectations. I'm actually, I got to tell you, along these lines, totally unrelated, I was a huge Veronica Mars fan. Actually, I still am a huge Veronica Mars fan. And on the season 3 DVD set, they had shot like a 15-minute presentation for what a Veronica Mars series would look like moving on when Veronica Mars was like in the FBI. And I really liked that. I love that show. And then they made, of course, the crowdfunded movie that was okay. It was kind of fun going back to Neptune and seeing the characters again. But I love the fact that Hulu is reviving Veronica Mars again. And I went back. Elizabeth had never seen Veronica Mars. She didn't even know what it was. And we watched the first episode of that show, and it's really good. Veronica Mars is really good, and I can't decide. I had sold my DVDs a long time ago because it's not out on Blu-ray, and it makes me, if you want to buy it digitally, you have to pay $30. I'm like, $30? I can go buy the DVD set used, I think, and I want to see it again. Taylor M says, "Hey Rob, nice, by the way, nice Wayland Yutani avatar. Hey Rob, any thoughts on Netflix Witcher series? Looks good. I mean, Henry Cavill, I will watch the show. I can't wait to see it. The game's cool. I mean, I think I've only played Witcher 3, but I'll watch that show. I hope it's great. Look, as I said, I'm always looking for great stories, well told, wherever they may be, and any genre. People. I'm always talking about how much I love The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, and people are like, you like that? I'm like, look, I don't care if something's science fiction, fantasy, or horror. My favorite things don't tend to be science fiction, fantasy, or horror. They're not that kind of genre stuff, but I love anything that's a great story that is well told. That's it. And I think Witcher's got money behind it. I can't wait to see it. Mark C is here. I get the impression CBS All Access was trying to use Netflix as a financial institution. Netflix feels burned over by Star Trek Discovery and closed the wallet. You know what? I think you could be right about that. If Midnight's Edge is reporting about what went down with the short treks is true, I could see that. And the fact is, Star Trek Discovery has not become a water cooler show amongst the general population. The fans that like it, and they talk about it. They're passionate fans for Star Trek Discovery, but it's certainly divided the fan base. I'm not a fan of the show. And I think what they ended up doing this season, I get why they did it, but I think Star Trek Discovery suffered from one thing. It was designed to be, by Brian Fuller, a certain kind of a show, and then all of his ideas, he was kicked to the curb for budgetary reasons. They just didn't understand how much a Star Trek show was going to cost because nobody ever bothered to call up Rick Berman. If there's somebody in Hollywood that produced 25 seasons of a show, Star Trek show, for 18 years, and you wanted to revive that show, the first thing I would do as a network executive, or say somebody at Secret Hideout, Alex Kurtzman's company, I would make a phone call to Rick Berman and say, Rick, we're going to pay you $500,000 to consult, or whatever, $1 million, whatever it would have cost, say $1 million. We just want you to come in here because Rick Berman oversaw all facets of production. Tell us how to produce a Star Trek TV series. How do you do it? We just want to know. You kept that ship running. You kept the train on those tracks for 18 years. And basically, we're doing the same thing. Visual effects, sets with visual effects, costumes. How can we amortize our costs? What do we need to know? They would have learned a lot. Nobody did that. But that would have been my advice to anybody. So I think you're right, Mark C. I think Netflix, they looked at CBS All Access, looked at Netflix and Netflix money as a place to go where they could have a piggy bank. And perhaps it didn't work out so well for them. And it's interesting. I wonder, I'd love to know, how did the Picard series wind up on Amazon? How did that go down? I don't know. Alexander Wilson says, I thought the last season of The Wire was bad with the fake serial killer and Omar's anticlimactic death. That didn't diminish the legacy of the show. I understood what they were going for. I liked the last season of The Wire. I didn't like it as much, but I thought it was still interesting and smart. There's their examination of the thing about The Wire. If you guys haven't watched The Wire, it's a 5-season series that basically examines the plight of the inner city and how does the city work. And at first, it starts out with cops going after on the ground drug dealers. And Idris Elba, I first saw Idris Elba playing a character named Stringer Bell. the show is incredible. The actors are incredible. And then it moved away. The second season dealt with labor unions on the docks. And then you got into the school system. And then you got into politics. And then you got into the news. And it was a really interesting examination of where American city life is today. And while I think, Alexander, you're right about the fake serial killer thing. I just thought it was interesting. I mean, I understand why it was done. It was more of a movie thing. And yes, Omar's anticlimactic death. But again, Omar, life on the streets, Omar became a larger than life figure. I mean, everyone loves Omar. If you guys don't know who Omar is, it's best you discover Omar on your own. But I can't recommend The Wire highly enough. And by the way, I guess if you watch it on HBO now, they actually remastered The Wire because it was 4:3, and they remastered it in HD and different aspect ratio, 16:9, and it looks incredible. Really thought it was incredible. Movie Maniac 86 says, "Happy birthday, Robert. Live long and prosper. Do you think CBS Paramount will ever withdraw the fan film guidelines?" That's a good question. You know what? I don't know. I think, I think that they probably had to for a while, and the fan film that I was involved with was the cause. But I think ultimately, I mean, the fan film guidelines seem to be working. But again, the threat of people making better and better Star Trek fan films is going to be out there. And for whatever reason, the Star Trek universe motivates people to continue to make fan films. And I think the fan film guidelines are actually a good thing, ultimately. I really do. So I don't think they're going to be rescinded. Somebody deleted a message, but they sent in a super chat, so thank you. Mark C says, in Ireland, Catholics drink Jameson and Protestants drink Bushmills. You've mentioned being Jewish. Which way does that go? Well, to tell you the truth, this is good to know, Mark C, because I like Bushmills. I do. I prefer Jameson, but I like Bushmills, and I do. So that's good. When I go to a bar in Ireland, I will order a Jameson and then I'll order a Bushmills because I don't want to piss anyone off. That's good to know. Magic K says Hickman is writing 2 comic books, House of X and Power of X. After that, the entire X-Men relaunch, plus previously the X-Men comic line will be axed before. Oh, the entire. Really? They're going to, before Power of X and House of X, they're going to. See, I hate that. Let's just look. The X-Men for me were like Star Trek. They were like, I love the X-Men so much. I read X-Men from. I started reading X-Men. I want to say around the original Dark Phoenix storyline, right? A little before that, and then I went back and I got like X-Men Annual, the Giant Size X-Men, and all the new X-Men when the new X-Men team started. And I read the X-Men pretty religiously up through Uncanny 400. So I read X-Men for a long, long time. And then I sort of just kind of gave up and then started reading the omnibuses or the hardcovers when they were released, because there's only so many X-Men stories you can tell. And even after reading hundreds of issues, it just became repetitive. But that's interesting. I hate when they go back to starting over. It bums me out. I don't like that. Not that they have to service me. Alexander Wilson says, I had a high school friend whose uncle was in the New Jersey Mafia that The Sopranos was based off of, and he said that the show wasn't far off from real life. I've heard that too. That's one of the things I think about The Sopranos that was so great is ultimately, these guys, that was their job. They were sort of born into that life, and they were tied into both legitimate businesses that they sort of ran in a crooked way. But yeah, I think you're probably right about that. I think Tony Soprano and what was going on there was probably pretty damn realistic. Yeah, so that's interesting to hear that. Yeah. I love The Sopranos, and I did like the way The Sopranos ended, because you just don't know. You kind of think you do, but you just don't know. But The Wire, it's funny. You reminded me of something, Alexander, that the end of The Wire, because The Wire would always end with these montages, and the season would end with the montages. I used to love their montages. The end of The Wire was great. the last episode ends with a great montage. And look, I'm really hoping that what I read the other day on the chat, was it David Silver something, that he's correct about the last episode of Game of Thrones. I mean, they could bring it all around and stick that landing. If I really hope that they do. I'm really curious to see how they do that, if in fact they do. I hope it's great. I mean, I really do. I hope it's great. So, we'll see. We'll see. We'll know if they stick the landing. And I'll jump into here and see what people have to say. Oh, I saw the Fen Wars here. Uncle Remus says the Star Trek fans that haven't seen Star Trek Discovery are the lucky ones. Interesting. And Mike Bodden says one of the big problems Netflix is facing is that market research out today shows that 55% of viewers prefer licensed content over original content via over-the-top services like Netflix. That, it's true, because remember, it's comfort food. I mean, most of us, here's something that I think that we imagination connoisseurs, we members of this, our Post-Geek Singularity community, and basically all of fans, we're the ones paying attention to these new shows and the new movies that are coming out, but we represent a very small portion of the audience. One of the things that's been happening, I've mentioned this before, that I find really interesting, it's sort of a litmus test for me. There's a girl that I went to elementary school, junior high, and high school with named Andrea Fiorito. I always liked her. She's very tall, and she always had a smile on her face. And I've known her. We've been friends for forever. And she's a Republican. We're on different sides of the political spectrum, but I've always liked her, and I always will like her. And she wanted to go see Endgame. She's been listening to the hype. She had no interest in the Marvel movies, so she actually sat down and started watching them. And she's sort of been charting her journey through the Marvel movies on Facebook. And she loved Iron Man 1. She loved Iron Man 1. And to me, it was very interesting because she didn't care. She doesn't know anything about comic books or science fiction. She didn't care. But what's interesting is I've always believed that great storytelling, whether it's genre storytelling or not, great storytelling will win over anybody, as long as they're, at least open-minded. If there are people that I know, I had friends who had parents that thought anything to do with science fiction, fantasy, and horror was trash and not worth watching. But the thing about Iron Man is, Iron Man begins very down to earth, even though Tony Stark's a multi-billionaire and he's an arms dealer, but he's a dude. Like, it doesn't start out in fantasy realm. It starts out in Afghanistan or wherever the U.S. military is. And it starts out in a very believable manner. So even if you're not predisposed to liking fantasy, or you think comic book movies are garbage or whatever, Iron Man will lull you in, and it lulled her in, and she loved it. And she's been working her way through. She liked all 3 Iron Man movies because, again, she's not looking at it from a discerning fan perspective. And people wonder, well, why did Iron Man 3 gross over $1 billion? Well, because it appealed to a lot of people. Now, we, the fan community, I mean, everyone that bitches and moans and complains about Game of Thrones or Star Trek Discovery or Force Awakens or Last Jedi or whatever we're bitching and moaning and complaining about, remember, what we think really has no bearing on what the rest of the world thinks. I mean, The Last Jedi made over $1.3 billion. It was not, when people go, yeah, but Force Awakens made so much more. Force Awakens was anomalous. They never expected it to make that much money. Nobody ever expected it to make that much money. It was a different thing. But general audiences, look, Game of Thrones it's hugely successful, as I talked about. It's doing well, what it was supposed to do. So it's winning. They're winning. HBO's winning. We can bitch and moan all we want, but I'm sure if my mom, my mom does not watch Game of Thrones because she doesn't like the kind of violence, but if she was watching it, she would have been like, that was amazing. That was not, by the way, a good Nancy Burnett impression. If you want to meet my mom, this past April, I interviewed my mom on her birthday, on her 80th birthday. And you can see where someone like myself, a geek like me, came from by looking at my mother. Magic K says, CB Chabulski probably felt those X-Men comics aren't profitable enough for him, so he got Hickman to fix it. Yeah, probably. I'm out of the loop. Is CB Chabulski the new editor-in-chief at Marvel? That's how out of it I am. But yeah, That's probably true, and Hickman is a great writer. So I understand why, but it's just so funny. Like, they used to change up comics within the comic itself. It would keep running, so you'd keep collecting it. I know they want to go back and bolster sales with another number one, but that's a bummer. Dieter Bastian says, happy birthday, Rob. Even if Game of Thrones season 8 got divisive. Is it divisive? I used to say divisive, but then people said divisive. I could be wrong. I should look that up too. But the memes that go online every week make it perhaps the best comedy show. And considering how many shows get axed, at least it will end officially. It's true. You know what's funny, though? I think people are only bitching and moaning and complaining about Game of Thrones because of how much it lives within them and how much they love it. And I loved it up till this season 2. And I even loved, like, here's the thing. I loved Game of Thrones season 8, episodes 1 and 2 very, very much. More so than a lot of people, or even Doomcock and Gary over at Nerdrotic were complaining about the filler episodes of 1 and 2. I really liked them. I thought they were great. And I've still liked a lot of things in the episodes. So you know, it's still beautifully made television. And while I think the story has been rushed over the last 2 seasons, which in hindsight, I bet they probably would have gone back and said, you know, we could have changed things and made it better. Believe me, I know the feeling there. But yes, it'll end officially, and I'm looking forward to it. I mean, look, I'm still excited about this episode. We're getting another feature-length episode of Game of Thrones, man. How interesting that's going to be. Like, I actually want to know. You know, I used to think, I was watching the episode, I'm like, but I want to know, like, what are they going to say? Like, I want to know what Jon Snow is going to say to Daenerys. What's he going to say to her? What's Tyrion going to say to her? You know, what's Davos Seaworth going to say? What's Sir Davos going to say? Like, what do you say once she's burned and killed everybody? Like, are her soldiers going to be like, I think the Dothraki are going to be like, yeah, you go, girl. But what about everybody else? Like, she had to have killed some of her own people. There's got to be some Dothraki and some Unsullied that were burned inadvertently, but burned on the ground. You know, is everybody just going to be like, way to go, girl? Yeah, you just destroyed King's Landing. Let's start all over again. I mean, it's not like they're going to go find Cersei. They can't do a forensics examination and find Cersei and Jaime, so no one's going to know, like, are they around? Did they escape? Where's Gregor? You know, where's Sandor? Where's the Clegane boys? Where'd they go? It's going to be interesting. I want to see what happens. So we shall see. Who knows? Charles Edwards says they probably couldn't afford to pay him that. Yeah, we'll see. I don't know who you're talking about, but that could be. I mean, all this money. It's people. Look, when you have successful TV shows, people want to get paid. They want to get some of that taste of that cheddar. Is Vesna and Victor Acosta are talking about, so Vesna all the way from Sarajevo, who's been here a long time, and Vesna's another girl. I mean, I think that Vesna, a woman, I should say, Vesna, Terry, and myself, and Willow, and anybody else who wants to join us should all meet and get rip-roaring drunk. We should get like a B&B or something and spend the weekend just hammered on a lake somewhere. So I guess Vesna's asking Victor how many seasons Firefly is. Yeah, it's only 1 season and not a long season. Then they made 1 feature film, which is sad that we're not going to see that. Somebody sent me a super chat and retracted the message. Movie Maniac 86 says, happy birthday, Rob. Live long and prosper. Oh, I already read that one, but I'll read it again because that was very nice of you. Yes, I think that the guidelines will stick around for a while. Dan V900 says, last year Marvel just relaunched the X-Men, and there was a relaunch 2 years before that. It's desperation to get Hickman to save the X-Men. Yeah, see, that's the whole thing. I mean, once again, the comic book industry is as guilty as anyone else. Never put your universe before your characters. I mean, anybody who's had any experience reading comics for any length of time knows that the way to get people interested is to have a great storyline. Like when Elektra was created by Frank Miller, or, you know, you do those things. I mean, hell, when they brought Typhoid Mary into Daredevil, I was reading. Or when Frank Miller came back and did Born Again, you know, and you can't, these gimmicks, that's what you want is slow and steady. Everyone wants to hit a grand slam. You know, I'd rather get a base hit every time because eventually you're going to win. how many times you strike out trying to get base hits. I didn't know that. A Lone Wolf times 6 says, who are your favorite Game of Thrones characters? For me, it's Arya and Tyrion. I drink and I know things. I am no one. I really liked Varys. He wasn't my favorite character, but he had plans within plans within plans within plans. And, it has been pointed out that the conversation with the little girl that he had that worked in the kitchen from the opening of last week's episode, they were trying to poison Daenerys. Oh, she hasn't eaten her food. They were trying to poison her, which I thought was pretty cool. I thought that was apparent to everybody. But to me, it was like, I get it. It was shorthand. And then, Varys is trying to. I mean, I was bummed out. I loved Varys. I think Tyrion is definitely one of my favorite characters. I like Arya, but I don't like how they've focused on her so much, especially within these battle sequences. Like, I would have liked to have seen, what does Sir Davos think watching all these people burn? As I've said, I want to see that. How does Jon Snow feel when he's watching somebody that's his queen, like destroying her, what would have been her subjects? I would like to have seen a lot more of the psychological aspects of it. I mean, I actually was a huge fan of Stannis Baratheon. I mean, he became a dick in the end, but I was with him for a while. My friend Gary Enton, we would talk about how we were kind of on Team Stannis for a while. We knew he was going to lose, but yeah, I think Tyrion's probably has always been sort of my favorite character. We'll see. CB Chbosky also launched Marvel 1000 with almost the entire industry comic creators to do it. Well, that's cool. I mean, that's a good thing that they're doing that, I guess. Taylor M says, to me, Dany's reaction seemed to be appropriate given the trauma, loss, PTSD, and rage she had towards Cersei. She obviously snapped, but it seemed like a human reaction, albeit a bad one. Yeah, but you know what? There's a human reaction, and then there's burning hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, maybe even 1 million people. That's not just snapping. I mean, the idea, here's what they turned the death of that many people. We'd never seen death on that scale. We'd seen a lot of death in Game of Thrones, but it was always up close and personal. What I don't like is the trivialization of, I mean, sure, we saw the boats go up in the Battle of Blackwater, but this was on another level. And I thought it was pretty crazy. And Arya never used her masks. It's true. Like, Arya I wanted to see her use masks, use her powers again. Charles Edwards said, Typhoid Mary, the Daredevil villain. I was saying, I was laughing about Typhoid Mary. I like those comics. A lot of people didn't. Which I can understand. Dan V900 says, Uncanny X-Men is ending again at issue 22 after starting off as a 10-week event with the relaunch. It's awful planning and hurts the consumers. I agree. But what happens is, the comic book industry, that whole industry has changed. The digital marketplace has changed it. Shabolsky. Justin Ward says it's pronounced is it Cebolsky? C-E. So it's not. So it's Cebolsky. All right. Good to know. Doshi says, hey, Rob, did you at least get a birthday cake? No, I did not get a birthday cake, but you never know. It's still only 4:00 in the afternoon. That's amazing to you. Sobolsky. Rob Crawford says, I can't remember what I've done 13 seconds ago. Bear Falcon. Bear Falcon is here. I think Bear Falcon is a new contributor. If so, Bear, I don't recognize your name, but thank you for being here and thanks for supporting the channel. Bear Falcon says, I paid for HBO versus you were given by HBO equals a huge split in the fans over the right to critique Game of Thrones that isn't explored as much as how dumb either side is. Well, here's the thing. I don't think you can categorize people as being dumb for loving a show because, let's face it, Game of Thrones is one of the most extraordinary TV shows ever. When people look back in 100 years at the medium of television, they're going to look back at Game of Thrones. I think, as that Twitter thread I read was so astute in pointing out, it's the kind of storytelling. I think the way Game of Thrones, it's not about the people that are mad about Game of Thrones, and I'm kind of one of them. The people that are mad about Game of Thrones and what happened, are not mad. They love the show. I think they're mad because the show dispensed with a certain method of storytelling that we had gotten used to that was working for us. The 10 episode arcs, and then usually in the ninth episode, some big shit would go down. And the rest of it was all the machinations and all the interpersonal conflicts. And then they erupted into a large event. And that large event was an externalization of all the internal things that were happening between the characters. Was a really interesting way to go with the show. And that storytelling device had been as much a part of watching it as anything else. You could anticipate what was happening. And I think in the 6th or the 7th and 8th season, the problem was the rapid fire pace, and they tended to go more external than internal. And one of the things, as I've talked about, it was the scenes with like Tyrion and Varys on two sides of that fence. Two friends that now were on ideological opposite ends of a spectrum. And I would like to have seen how that played out character-wise over the course of the series. They would have played that out over the course of a season, and each side would have been gathering their troops. Tyrion would have been gathering his troops. Varys would have been gathering people that were sympathetic to him and didn't want to see. And that anticipation of the conflict to come and what was happening was part of the Game of Thrones legacy. And I think what's happened is they've really changed that up, and they had to finish the story. And as somebody, I keep thinking about the guy that said, I don't need Game of Thrones to have a huge ending. I just needed it to end. And what he meant by that was that he wanted the show to be great, but he wanted to continue that interpersonal relationships, because what was so epic about Game of Thrones was not the battles. It was what was going on in the hearts and minds of our characters and how they reacted to each other. And what happened when you made a bad decision. If you promised Walter Frey you're going to marry his daughter, and then you just, I'm falling in love with a hot chick, I'm going to marry her, and think that there's no repercussions, you were mistaken. You were sorely mistaken. And I think that it was watching all this stuff play out, which was the appeal of the show. And I think now there's a lot of people that aren't as critical that are watching the show, but I do think the fact that they changed up the kind of storytelling was what people objected to. I paid for but I love this. I paid for HBO versus you were given by HBO. Huge split in the fans. I love that, over the right to critique it. But everybody, we're fans. We critique the show. The reason Game of Thrones exists is because we all loved it and continue to watch it, and people still love it. Senior alert system. Harpy barf day, Rob. Booze it up and riot. Well, thank you. I might do just that. Let's see. Chernobyl has been amazing so far. Okay, Taylor M. If you guys have HBO and you haven't watched Chernobyl, which is, of course, a docudrama brought to us by Craig Mazin, who I work with a little bit on a movie that James Gunn wrote called The Specials. I was a producer on that a long time ago. I'm happy to see Craig Mazin brought this into existence. He wrote Hangover 2 and 3, but Craig is a very smart guy, and he created the show Chernobyl, that is a docudrama about what happened. And oh my God, first of all, it is first-rate television all the way. But man, I was cringing watching that first episode. Cringing not because it was bad, cringing because I was thinking about those poor people and what they were going through. And man, it was brutal. I have not watched episode 2. I can't wait to see episode 2. I will indeed watch it. Lone Wolf ×6 says, did you like Netflix version of Bullseye? More accurate to the Daredevil comics? Yeah, I thought so. Not as I really did. I thought Daredevil was pretty spectacular. I was really sorry to see it go. But yeah, I have a soft spot, especially for the extended version, the director's cut of Mark Steven Johnson's Daredevil. I don't think it's great, but it's definitely respectable. And I think the longer version is better. But I think the Netflix version of all the characters was a little bit more true to the comic, and I enjoyed it. Movie Finobi says, happy birthday to a fine, entertaining, inclusive man. Well, thank you. But it's all you guys who are here. You guys are the inclusive ones. You make it great. And it's been fun to celebrate my birthday with you. Taylor M says, I followed the history of Chernobyl and the nuclear age in general. In the show, the actors even look like their counterparts. I would imagine, having watched it, I think that they probably go out of their way to do that. I mean, Jared Harris, man, oh my God, he's so good. He's, of course, Richard Harris's son, and he was on Mad Men. He's been in a million different things. I really like him a lot. Hey, Rob, have you ever disagreed with John so much that you wanted to grab a steel chair and knock him out? No, I've never felt that way about people. I mean, I like talking with John. I think when we disagree, it makes great television, but we're always respectful, I think, because at the end of the day, we're just talking about movies and TV, which the baseline of talking about movies and TV and things that we love is that we love them. They should be that that it's fun. It's fun to have that. It's fun to be able to chat about these things, and to get mad to the point where you're going to hate people or be, say mean things. That's bad. Uncle Remus says, Rob Crawford, get HBO Go. I recommend that. I hadn't had HBO in a while, and for the new season of Game of Thrones, we did get the HBO app. Watching the compression on the Battle of Winterfell sucked, so I'm going to get the Blu-rays. But I said I wasn't, but I'm going to. I have to get them all. But it's good. And there's all this other stuff on HBO. There's all these documentaries, and now I'm watching the like the Deuce that I never saw. Good stuff. Save a seat for Schnepp. Oh, dang, this is still going. R&B as a champ. Well, thank you. I appreciate it. By the way, tomorrow would have been John Schnepp's 52nd birthday. His birthday was a day after mine. And I will be having a cocktail tonight, and I'm going to be pouring one out. Well, pouring one out meaning pouring one down my throat for the great John Schnepp. And I wouldn't be doing this if it wasn't for him. He was the one that invited me on Collider Heroes back in 2015. He started my YouTube career 4 years ago, and it's led me here to you. So here's to the great John Schnepp. Tomorrow would have been his birthday. I will miss the guy. So yeah. Go John Schnepp. I hope that he would have loved Endgame. I wish I could have seen it with him. Robservations starts. Cue the Eborg Thrawn theme in the background. Yes. Have you been reading War of the Realms by chance? You know what? I haven't. That's something I'm aware of it. I will pick it up. I'm sure they're going to collect that because why not? Fenwar. Did you say Fenwar? I'm here from New York City. I did see that you're here now, and I love it when you say that. The alien asks, "Are you going to get drunk?" Well, probably not drunk. Maybe a little inebriated. It's really hard to get me really drunk. I mean, I get drunk, but not like slurring drunk. You get older, people don't like you to have a good time anymore. So Mark Hansen says, happy birthday, Rob. Love what you do and also what you bring to John's channel. You and Ashley are the peanut butter and butter to his mayo. Well, I'm glad you say that. I really like doing the show with John and Ashley. I like them both very much, and it's fun to do the show. Uncle Remus says, John Schnepp Day tomorrow. Tell a John story tomorrow, Rob. Rest in peace. Yeah, I should come up with a good one. I always loved hanging out with John. He was great. Dan V 900 says, my birthday was 3 days ago, and I was born on Mother's Day. I was on TV as a baby, and then my film and television career went downhill after that. There's still time. You can still do it again. Well, listen, I think I'm going to bring this chat to an end. This is a long chat. I want to thank you for joining me this on my birthday. I want to everybody that's sent in super chat support for the channel. Thank you very much. It's great to have you here. It's great to have all these new subscribers here. Remember, send me letters. Send me letters to the Burnettwork.net. If you have letters, I love letters. And next time I read one of Willow's scientific analyses, I promise I will figure out how to pronounce all of the words that I couldn't pronounce. But I really love the fact that Willow wrote such an in-depth analysis about why Earth diseases could not affect aliens. That is fantastic. So anyway, again, thank you all for being here, and thanks for helping me grow this channel. And I've got a lot of big plans for this. It's going to be interesting, and we're going to see where we go from here. I will be back tomorrow. I will be back on the John Campea show tomorrow. The sun will come out tomorrow. And John Wick, I'm seeing John Wick 3 tomorrow night at 7 o'clock. I've had my tickets for a long time now, but I'm going to the ArcLight Pasadena. I'm looking forward to dipping my wick with John. It's going to be great. And all of you, thank you for being great imagination connoisseurs and being members of the Post-Geek Singularity community. Go to the Burnettwork.net, look around. By the way, post things on the Imagination Connoisseur Gallery. I'm blown away. That if you haven't gone to the Imagination Connoisseur Gallery, there's some great stuff there, but there's a woman who has a Captain America motorcycle that's so up to date, it's Endgame specific. It even says on your left, it's so good. And I love seeing that. And so if you've got things you want to post there, please do, whether it's short stories or artwork or tattoos or I really like people's horror tattoos when it's great artwork. I love that. Superhero tattoos, Star Trek tattoos, movie-related tattoos, any tattoos, whatever you want to share, go to the Imagination Connoisseur Gallery on the Burnettwork.net and post away. Also, Mike Bodden, our great moderator here, and thanks to the other moderators here, to Jim and to Terry for being moderators. Thank you for your time. And Mike Bodden actually he's coming up with a design for a Post-Geek Singularity emblem that I really, really like. It's very cool, and I will probably put that in the store, basically because if I put that in my little store at TeePublic, then I can order one for myself, which is pretty much what I want. So that'll be up soon. So thanks to the moderators doing a great job. And is that Nerdrotic is here? Like the real Nerdrotic? Gary Beekler's here? If that's true, high five to Gary Beekler. I love his channel. I love Nerdrotic. I want to know who does Nerdrotic. Is that his kid? Because I love that at the beginning. I love his graphic. I do watch the Nerdrotic channel, and you should too. And I watch Victor Von Doomcock, and I watch Midnight's Edge unapologetically. So all good. Everybody, thank you for being here. Remember, every person you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear, and all you have to do is listen. So I'll be back tomorrow, and and thanks for helping me celebrate my birthday in grand fashion. And thanks for subscribers. And if you haven't subscribed, I saw an interesting statistic, by the way, that half the people that watch this channel are not subscribers, which I thought was pretty crazy. So if you like this channel and you like listening to me yammer away, and by the way, I'm getting more and more people who detract from me. They're like, shut the fuck up. I know, right? I probably should. But anyway, you guys, thanks for being here. Thanks for being part of the Post-Geek Singularity community. And I will see you tomorrow. And as always, have a better day.